Hi, good morning, everyone. Today I'm on here wanting to talk with all you parents out there that have children, and I want to talk about expectations. Now, I'm going to ask you to engage in a thought exercise in just a couple of minutes that I think that you'll be really happy that you did. So I'm excited to pose some questions to you. But before I do that, I want to give you some context behind what I'm going to ask of you. So when I think about expectations that we have for ourselves, but for our children, it's a lot. And the expectations that we have come from, very ingrained ways of how we think about ourselves, what we need, what we think we deserve, what we want out of our lives. And we have certain expectations, right? Now, since everything that's going on and a lot of our support and our structure has been pulled out from under us, I'm wondering if those expectations that you've had for yourself and for your kids are working for you right now. Are you trying desperately to meet a certain expectation of yourself, whether it's at home or your relationships or your work or your parenting? Are you trying so hard and getting frustrated or anxious or sad or angry because you're trying to meet a certain expectation that you would have for yourself? And it would make a lot of sense, right? Because we have these expectations for ourselves that we've always had for ourselves. And shifting those expectations, I don't think that comes instinctually. And so one of my questions before I get to my larger question is, are your expectations for yourself, for your family, for your friends, for your children working for you? And if your answer is no, based on you're not meeting those expectations or you're meeting them with a cost, what is that cost? Is it feeling bad? Is it yelling? Is it making you feel depressed? Is it making you feel overwhelmed? What is the cost? And if there is a significant cost that does not feel good, that is not working for you, I want to encourage you to look at those expectations and think about how you can shift them. I'm not talking about lowering them. I'm not talking about letting them fly out the window and having no expectations. Absolutely not. What I'm saying is, how can you manage them? And what I mean by that is managing your expectations to make them work for yourself and for your family and in your relationships. And so, I kind of liken what's going on right now and how we hold expectations and kind of compare them to the expectations that we have during like times of grief or when you're going through a really hard time. People will say, either, take some time for yourself. What are you doing for yourself? How can you shift some priorities around? And what they're talking about is making it work for you so that you are okay. And I want to encourage you to do that for yourself, as well as yourself as a parent. And then also for your children too. I mean, this is a lot for kids to be going through. It's a big shift. And I'll tell you, my kids love being home, but it is a change and they're trying to figure it out. For those of us that work and for our kids that have been in school, it takes time to get into your groove and know what works for you and what doesn't work for you. It seems like we've been doing this for a long time, but we haven't been doing it that long. And so trying to shift your expectations to something that's more manageable. So maybe, let's say your child has 5 things they need to do for the day that they need to turn in. Now, if that's a really hard thing to do because you also have to work or you have other children pulling for your time or your child isn't compliant and is giving you a really hard time, or you're not even sure how to teach your kid this information, or you're lost on the interweb of, the platforms that the school is using, whatever the case may be, do you need to get all 5 things of those done? And if you need to get all those 5 things done, because that's the expectation, what is that going to look like? Is that going to come with a lot of tears with your kids, or maybe tears from yourself? Are you going to get frustrated? Are you going to get angry? Are you going to feel really anxious? Is it going to cost you in other ways, like your work suffers? Or could you do 3 of the 5 in a more patient, loving way where your child is not stressed out, or your children are not stressed out, you're not angry or upset or frustrated. And could that be okay? Could you let that be okay? Now you may be saying, well, I don't want my child to suffer, and I want them to get good grades, and I want them to be doing everything they're doing, and I want to be modeling that we have to do everything that we need to do. And what I would challenge you around that thought, because sure, and I'm sure many people have that thought, is what do you want to model for your children during this time? What's important for them to see and to hear? They know, well, depending on their development and how old they are, they know something's up. They understand what's going on to a certain degree, and that this isn't common or normal, and that everyone's like really just trying to figure this out. And you're teaching them how to be flexible. You're teaching them how to be in touch with themselves. And if they're highly, frustrated, or they're anxious, or you are, they're not being their best selves, and they're not in a headspace to be their most creative, problem-solving self. And then on top of that, having to do schoolwork that might be challenging or really challenging for them. And so I want you to think about that, how you can manage your expectations and really be in tune with how you're doing, and picking up on how your child is doing, because there are things to do. There's schoolwork there. It's not going anywhere. What are the consequences if it's turned in late or an assignment isn't done? If it's keeping you in a better place. And the actual question that I brought up at the beginning of this video that I want to ask everyone is, I want you to fast forward 10 years from now. And I want you to think back on this time. And what do you want to remember? Do you want to remember that it was so challenging? And I'm talking specifically kind of with your kids and the schoolwork, because that's what we've been talking about. Do you want to remember it being so frustrating? Do you want to remember that there were tears, or you were stressed out, or your child was so stressed out because they had to get every last thing done and get all A's? Or do you want to remember that you worked with your child, you gave it your best shot, they gave it their best shot, you did it together in a more loving, patient, calm, unfrustrated way? And I think most people would prefer the latter. And so I know as a parent, I try to keep that in mind. How do I want to remember this experience? What experience do I want to give to my child? Do I want them to remember, oh, my mom was a horrible teacher who was so frustrated and angry with me, and arguing with me about getting things done? Or do I want my children to remember that I was really helpful, and we had fun doing the assignments because we weren't trying to rush through them, and that when my children were frustrated, that I could respond to that and be flexible? So give you some things to think about. Be kind to yourself and be kind to your children. Oh, and the other thing that I want to mention is, if your kids are struggling or they're having a hard time, because this is really hard for kids. There's lots of kids out there that are very isolated. There's kids that are very anxious and or feeling depressed. And I want to encourage you as parents to be an advocate for your child. You know, the teachers see them in person, but it's not as consistent now for a lot of kids, and so they're not necessarily picking up on how the kids are doing. And so you may need to advocate, or if your child is older, maybe in high school, helping them to advocate for themselves and letting teachers know, whether you email them or have a separate meeting, or you meet with the teacher about how this adjustment is feeling, and if it feels like too much work, or you may look to the teacher for strategies, but that they can still be a support. I want to encourage parents to be an advocate in that way for their child too. So Hope this was helpful. Think about those expectations and managing your expectations. And then again, how you want to think about this time looking back, and being your best self and your best self as a parent. All right, have a great day. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.